Hi everyone, Chief Geek 3D here. I'm a cybersecurity professional and yes, a CISSP, Certified Information Security Systems Professional for those keeping score. Today we've got a wild story that's equal parts serious and facepalm worthy. We're talking about how the Trump administration tried using the secure messaging app Signal to dodge audits and public accountability, and how it spectacularly backfired. Yes, I know this video is going to be a long one, but I strongly urge you to stick around for the full ride. We're not just here to gossip about what was said in those leaked Signal messages. There's already plenty of coverage about the content. What's missing, and what I'm here to break down, is how it happened, why it's a nightmare from both the cybersecurity and government transparency standpoint, and what this exposes about the current state of secure communication practices at the highest levels of power. We'll walk through the technical failures, the cybersecurity threats that's exposed top officials to, and the alternative systems they should have been using, from secure identity management to platforms that balance encryption and auditability. And yes, there are even some practical security lessons here for everyone, whether you're in IT, cybersecurity, or just a regular person trying to stay safe online. This video is designed to be an expose for both technical and non-technical audiences, breaking down why this wasn't just an embarrassing political blunder, it was a catastrophic operational security failure with real-world risks. Think of it as a masterclass in what not to do with sensitive government communications. And before the whataboutism starts, don't worry, we'll also talk about Obama's NSA customized BlackBerry and Clinton's unencrypted private email server allegedly stashed in a bathroom, because this isn't about picking sides. I'm not Team Red or Team Blue. The only red team and blue team I care about are cybersecurity offense and defense. This isn't about politics. It's about accountability, infrastructure, and the sheer irresponsibility of officials trying to bypass secure systems in favor of convenience or secrecy. My only allegiance is to cybersecurity best practices and public transparency. And when those get ignored, at this scale, it's not just a scandal, it's a national security risk. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and check the description for all of my socials. I'm on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Matrix, TikTok, and Twitch, where we game on Linux, talk tech, and dig into cybersecurity. Join the Discord for great convos, and if you want to support my work, I'm fully independent. I only take sponsors aligned with my values and turn down 95% of offers. You can back the channel via Patreon or grab some merch, all linked below. But first, a quick message from our sponsor, and it's very relevant. Secure your communications with Tuta email. In the world of cybersecurity, using the right tool for the right job is everything, and that doesn't just apply to government officials, as we'll see today. It matters for you and me too. That's why I'm happy to have Tuta as today's sponsor. Tuta, formerly Tutanota, is an end-to-end encrypted email service that puts security and privacy first. Unlike your typical free email, Tuta automatically encrypts all your data, even subject lines and attachments, so that only you and your intended recipient can read your emails. No prying eyes, no data mining, just private, secure communication. What I love about Tuta is that it's open source and based in a privacy-friendly jurisdiction. They don't log IP addresses, there are no ads, and their code is out there for verification, so you know it's the real deal. It's a great example of choosing the right secure tool for the job. If you need confidential email, you use a provider built from the ground up for privacy. You don't try to jerry-rig something sketchy. Tuta offers free accounts and premium plans with extra features like custom domains and secure calendar. So if you care about digital security and privacy, and hey, if you're watching this video, so I suspect you do, check out the link in the description to give Tuta a try. Big thanks to Tuta for sponsoring this video and supporting cybersecurity education. All right, with that said, let's get into today's main story. It's a doozy. The Signal Fiasco, a war council in a group chat. Imagine this, a handful of top government officials, we're talking cabinet level, national security level folks, coordinating a military strike with a group chat on their phones. Sounds insane, right? Well, that actually happened. Members of the Trump administration used Signal, a popular encrypted messaging app, to discuss highly sensitive war plans in Yemen. And in an almost unbelievable blunder, they inadvertently added a journalist to that group chat. Yes, you heard that correctly. The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, suddenly found himself included what amounted to a Yemen war cabinet signal thread, receiving live updates about impending U.S. airstrikes. This really happened, and the fallout was immediate. Once Goldberg realized the messages were legit, once the bombs started falling on the Houthis as described in the chat, he blew the whistle with a public article titled, "The Trump Administration Accidentally Texted Me Its War Plans." You can bet that got Washington's attention. Headlines hit the news, and suddenly a private Signal chat had turned into front-page news. It's like a scene out of a political satire. I mean, accidentally briefing a reporter on classified war plans via group text? That's some next-level oops. Serious stuff. But you almost have to laugh at the absurdity. So why use Signal, also known as how to not handle government comms? So how did we get here? Why were top U.S. officials using Signal of all things to coordinate something as critical as military operations? The answer? To avoid accountability, plain and simple. Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messaging app, beloved by journalists, activists, and privacy-minded folks for its strong security. It's great at keeping conversations private, which is exactly what these officials wanted. They did not want any record of their communication that could be audited or archived. In government, communications are usually subject to oversight and laws like the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, which lets the public request official records. But if you conduct business on an encrypted app that doesn't store messages on a government server, you're basically essentially trying to skirt those public records laws. No record, no FOIA. That was the idea. And here's the thing. We've seen this movie before. The difference is, last time, they brought in the NSA before sending texts. Obama's BlackBerry, security versus convenience. President Barack Obama famously resisted giving up his beloved BlackBerry when he took office in 2009, sparking a showdown with his security team. He was the first sitting U.S. president to insist on keeping a personal smartphone. His predecessors, George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, avoided email and personal devices to sidestep security and records-keeping issues. Obama's attachment to his Crackberry, as BlackBerries were nicknamed, raised eyebrows in the intelligence community. The concern was that a normal BlackBerry wasn't approved for classified communication and could be a juicy target for hackers. One expert warned that putting sensitive or classified info on a standard BlackBerry would be a risky proposition, given that even though BlackBerries have built-in encryption and were used by thousands of FBI staff for unclassified chatter, they didn't meet the NSA's stringent security standards for top-secret data. In short, the president's emailing habit posed both technical and policy headaches. What if foreign spies popped his phone open like a piñata? And even if not, how do you preserve all those messages to comply with the Presidential Records Act? Key security concerns here. Hacking and eavesdropping. Security analysts worried that BlackBerry could be compromised remotely. For example, malware might hijack the phone's microphone or turn it into a location tracker, essentially bugging the Oval Office or pinpointing the president's movements. A DHS database had flagged over a dozen vulnerabilities in BlackBerry software since 2004, fueling some of these fears. Classified info leaks. The device wasn't certified for classified communications. BlackBerry's encryption is solid for everyday use, but it wasn't cleared for handling top-secret government secrets. Thus, any classified discussion over Obama's phone could be an open window for espionage, a big no-no under executive branch IT policy. Legal and records risks. Under the Presidential Records Act, official communication must be archived. A personal device blurs the line between private and presidential. Every email Obama sent to staff would eventually become a public record, which is exactly why prior presidents abstained from personal email. There was a real worry that a casual LOL to a friend might someday be subject to congressional subpoenas or FOIA requests. As one commentator quipped, if Obama didn't like that, he had to choose between being a leader of the free world and having his BlackBerry. How they locked down the BarackBerry, as they called it. It was a custom secure device. Obama won a compromise to keep a smartphone, But not just any off-the-shelf BlackBerry. He received a new BlackBerry loaded with special NSA-approved encryption software, essentially a hardened, bespoke device vetted by U.S. intelligence. NSA specialists literally spent months performing surgery on it to tighten security and meet federal standards. Limited contacts. The device's address book was whitelisted to a small circle of trusted correspondents. Only senior aides, a few friends, and family could reach Obama's BlackBerry. No random emails from Uncle Joe. As White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs noted, use of the device was limited to a select group to mitigate risk. Feature restrictions. Certain functions were likely neutered. For instance, Obama wasn't allowed to use it for normal phone calls, as voice calls on unsecured lines equal eavesdropping risks. They also ensured the device could truly be turned off, so malware couldn't secretly keep the microphone on. In other words, no one was turning the president's phone into a pocket spy. Secure routing. All presidential emails from the BlackBerry were routed through secure government servers, not commercial networks. This added a layer of encryption and monitoring, and also made sure those communications were captured for archiving. Obama had to give up his old personal email address and use a secret new one on this system. Goodbye hotmail.com and gmail.com, hello whitehouse.gov. No classified chats. Perhaps most importantly, Obama's team treated the BlackBerry as unclassified only. Classified discussions stayed on approved secure lines. The hardened landlines and other secure comms, the BlackBerry was for routine messaging and keeping in touch, not for sharing nuclear launch codes. This policy kept the most sensitive data and information off a device that, despite all the upgrades, still wasn't an official top-secret terminal. These measures turned Obama's addictive gadget into a presidentially palatable device, a sort of ultra-secure BlackBerry. It wasn't perfect, but encryption still meant some isolation. Only those with compatible secure devices could communicate with them. But it struck a balance. Obama got to keep thumb typing, and the NSA could unclench their butts a little. Let's move on to the start of Trump's Signal saga, when secure apps backfire. Fast forward to the next administration, and you get almost the mirror image problem. Instead of fighting to use modern tech openly, the Trump White House jumped into secretive messaging. Reports emerged that many of President Trump's staff and even some cabinet officials were using end-to-end encrypted apps like Signal and Confide to chat amongst themselves. On the surface, that sounds like good security hygiene. Encryption, no eavesdropping, no Hillary-style email hacks, but these ultra-secure messaging apps created a new kind of OpSec fail. They automatically deleted messages, which is great for privacy and terrible for legal compliance. Essentially, the Trump team's group chats were set to self-destruct, meaning there'd be no record if someone later needed to audit or archive them. This practice flies in the face of the Presidential Records Act, which requires that official communications be preserved. As it turns out, this message will self-destruct is not a feature the National Archives is fond of. The controversy blew up quickly. Watchdog groups sued President Trump in 2017 for allegedly violating federal record-keeping laws, noting that disappearing texts could be destroying essential historical records. Even an attorney from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press weighed in, calling the use of auto-deleting apps by White House staff incredibly troubling. Under the PRA's clear rules, in plain terms, the White House switching to vanishing messages was like an IT department's nightmare security. Perfect encryption with zero accountability. It's hard to do oversight of forensic investigations when the evidence evaporates into the ether. As one Atlantic piece succinctly put it, communication apps with disappearing text could run afoul of presidential record laws and might not be as secure as they seem. In other words, the Trump team's attempt to plug leaks with encrypted Signal chats just created a black hole in the record books and raised the question of whether those apps were vetted well enough themselves. And as it turns out, Confide, one popular app, hadn't undergone rigorous security audits. In the end, both the Obama and Trump cases highlight a common theme. Technology moves faster than White House rules. Obama's BlackBerry saga was about dragging antiquated security policies into the smartphone era without getting hacked, while Trump's Signal fiasco was about containing information leaks without shredding the rulebook. The tone might be lightly humorous in hindsight, a president clinging to his Crackberry or officials using off-the-record apps in an administration obsessed with leaks. But the stakes were serious. When the commander-in-chief and his staff skirt established IT protocols, security pros and lawyers start sweating. The moral for any cybersecurity-aware observer, whether it's a funky BlackBerry or an encrypted chat app, you always have to balance convenience and secrecy with compliance and security common sense. If you don't, it will come back to bite you, even if your messages don't self-destruct. After all, nothing undermines OpSec quite like a headline that the leader of the free world needs a lecture on digital hygiene. To be fair, Signal's privacy features are a big part of its appeal. It uses robust encryption to scramble messages so only the intended recipients can read them. It even has disappearing messages that auto-delete after a set time. For personal chat, that's awesome. For government transparency, it's a nightmare. Messages that auto-delete aren't available for later review, and without special archiving in place, they won't show up in response to FOIA requests. And let's be clear, U.S. law does require government officials to preserve records of official business, even if it's done through texts or emails on private accounts. Intentionally conducting business off the grid can be illegal, violating the Presidential Records Act or Federal Records Act, and is definitely unethical. As one commentator put it bluntly, using Signal like this suggests they were doing it with the express purpose of avoiding any FOIA requests. In other words, they didn't want a paper trail because they knew what they were doing wouldn't withstand scrutiny. If this is giving you flashbacks to Hillary Clinton's email server saga, you're not alone, and the parallels are worth unpacking. Let's take a quick detour to talk about that. BleachBit, bathrooms, and the battle of bad OpSec. Clinton versus Trump. As cybersecurity experts, we can't help but shake our heads at the irony in two high-profile communications controversies. Hillary Clinton's private email server saga and the Trump team's use of disappearing message apps, plus the post-presidency Mar-a-Lago files fiasco are, in different ways, masterclasses in what not to do for good operational security, or as we call it, OpSec. Let's unpack the parallels, from BleachBit to bathrooms and the very different ways people reacted to each. BleachBit versus disappearing messages. Clinton's team famously deleted about 33,000 emails from her private server, allegedly using a software called BleachBit to wipe the data so thoroughly that, as one congressman quipped, even God can't read them. BleachBit is designed to prevent recovery of deleted files. Basically, the digital equivalent of shredding and burning documents. This wasn't just hitting the delete key. It was intentional destruction of data, and Clinton's critics seized on it as evidence of a cover-up. After all, you don't typically bust out industrial-strength data wipes for yoga schedules and wedding plans. Clinton maintained the erased emails were personal, but the optics of using a tool literally named after bleach sure didn't help her case. On the other side, the Trump White House had its own high-tech spin on vanishing communications. Reports emerged that many Trump administration aides were using encrypted messaging apps with self-destruct timers like Signal and Confide to discuss government business. In early 2017, amid a frenzy over leaks and deep state fears, staffers resorted to these disappearing message apps so conversations would auto-delete after being read. In other words, where Clinton's team retroactively wiped emails, Trump's team tried to ensure messages never stuck around in the first place. From an OpSec perspective, the motive is the same: limit the paper trail. Why go through the trouble of acid washing servers after the fact if you can have your chats self-erased by default? It's the modern approach to cover your tracks. Messages that magically evaporate like a Snapchat, leaving little for investigators or historians to find. The use of disappearing messages in government raises huge legal and ethical flags. In fact, Trump's own lawyers explicitly warned staff that using apps like Signal for official business could violate the Presidential Records Act. It's almost funny. The same practice Republicans railed against Clinton for, sidestepping official communication channels, cropped up in Trump's campaign via encrypted chats. Secure messaging apps like Signal do provide strong encryption and privacy, which is great for personal use. But when government officials use them to dodge record keeping, it becomes a transparency nightmare. From a security standpoint, encrypted apps are very effective at keeping outsiders from eavesdropping, but they can also keep Congress and auditors from ever seeing what was said. It's the BleachBit philosophy into the messaging platform. What conversation? There's no record here. And that's a double-edged sword for accountability. Classified info. Server versus bathroom storage. Now, let's talk about classified information and how it was handled, or more appropriately, mishandled in each case. Clinton's private email server wasn't supposed to hold classified material, yet it did. The FBI found 110 emails containing information that was classified at the time they were sent, including some at top secret level. Security professionals cringed at this. None of that should have ever been on an unclassified homebrew server. Beyond violating State Department policies, her setup lacked the robust security monitoring a government system would have had. The technical risk was significant. A server in a basement managed by a small IT team is far more vulnerable to hacking than the secured state.gov email system. In fact, while investigators found no proof of a breach, they assessed it was quite possible that hostile actors gained access to Clinton's account without leaving a trace. Simply put, running work email, especially classified discussions, on a private server was a serious OpSec fail. It's just like storing some of the crown jewels in your personal safe and then being surprised when people ask if any went missing. And then we have Donald Trump's trove of classified files at Mar-a-Lago, perhaps the only security lapse that can rival Emailgate in its audacity. After leaving office, Trump brought boxes full of classified documents to his Florida resort residence, instead of turning them over to the National Archives. These weren't just innocuous papers. They included materials at the highest secrecy levels. Some reportedly even were documents about nuclear capabilities and spy programs. Worse yet, the storage situation was comically bad from a security standpoint. The Justice Department's 2023 indictment revealed that Trump kept some boxes in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago, stacked floor to ceiling next to the toilet and shower. Yes, you read that right. Highly sensitive national secrets piled in a bathroom with a crystal chandelier overhead, as if they were towels or extra toilet paper. Other boxes ended up in a ballroom stage and a basement storage room in a club that saw tens of thousands of guests coming and going. This is the kind of setup that makes security professionals want to pull their hair out. Kind of why I'm bald at this point, don't you think? Fun jest. Unlike Clinton's emails, which at least require a cyber attack to steal, Trump's files were literally one broken padlock or an insider away from exposure. Any spy or clever guest with access to the club could potentially snap a photo or walk off with a document. It's a physical security nightmare. No badge access, no escort required, documents in plain cardboard boxes instead of secured safes. The indictment flatly noted Mar-a-Lago was not an authorized location for classified storage and that these documents were stored in various locations, like a ballroom and bathroom, despite the constant flow of visitors. From an OpSec perspective, both Clinton and Trump flouted basic protocols for handling sensitive information, just in different ways. Clinton effectively improvised a mini data center for government work without government oversight and later tried to clean it up with BleachBit. Trump treated classified docs like personal mementos, stashing them in his club as if a bathroom could double as a SCIF or sensitive compartmented information facility. In both cases, the technical risks were enormous. Clinton's server could have been hacked by foreign intelligence. The FBI said the threat was real, even if they couldn't prove it happened. Trump's unsecured boxes could have been accessed by unauthorized individuals. Recall that Mar-a-Lago was already a known target for foreign agents. A Chinese intruder was caught there in 2019 with spy gear and was generally a soft target. As former DOJ official Mary McCord summed up, even just keeping highly classified documents in such improper, vulnerable locations creates a significant national security threat. When it comes to safeguarding secrets, a locked door at a beach club or an IT guy with an off-the-shelf server are woefully inadequate. Let's talk the technical risks in both cases. Let's drill down on the technical dangers posed by each incident, because from a cybersecurity standpoint, these weren't victimless violations. They carried real risks. Clinton's email server risks. Storing and sending classified info on a personal server meant that data was outside the government's secure enclave. The server lacked enterprise-grade intrusion detection and 24/7 monitoring, making it a juicy target for hackers. FBI Director James Comey noted that while they didn't find a smoking gun of a hack, it is possible that hostile actors gained access to the system. To Clinton's account, in cyber terms, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. A well-executed breach might leave no trace. Additionally, by deleting emails and wiping the server, Clinton's team not only prevented investigators from seeing those communications, they also lost the chance to forensically analyze if the server had been compromised. That's a self-inflicted blind spot in assessing damage. The situation was a perfect storm of sensitive data and insufficient security and potential state-sponsored attackers sniffing around. Not exactly what you want from the nation's diplomatic communications. Trump's document storage risks. Classified documents in hard copy have their own security requirements, typically locked in approved safes inside secured facilities, with strict access logs. By hoarding boxes at Mar-a-Lago, those rules went out the window. Anyone with physical access to the areas where boxes were kept could potentially be read, photographed, or steal the documents. And plenty of people had such access: cleaning staff, resort employees, guests at events, not to mention determined intruders. In one cringeworthy episode, a box even toppled over in a storage room, spilling secret documents onto the floor. If that doesn't set off alarm bells, nothing will. Security experts pointed out that Mar-a-Lago's open environment, where foreign visitors and others with connections to foreign governments mingle, meant it was a goldmine for espionage if classified papers were accessible. Essentially, the technical risk here wasn't electronic, but physical. The documents could literally walk out the door, and unlike digital files, you can't remotely wipe a piece of paper or detect a cyber intrusion. If someone copied a document, we might never know. It's a nightmare scenario for those tasked with protecting national defense information. In both cases, these lapses meant that highly sensitive information was one step away from falling into the wrong hands, whether by cyber espionage or old-fashioned snooping. The attack surface was unnecessarily enlarged by these OpSec failures. Let's talk about the contrasting reactions and double standards. Perhaps most striking is how politics and media treated the two scandals so differently. Clinton's email controversy exploded into a massive issue in 2016. It sparked FBI and congressional investigations, wall-to-wall media coverage, and arguably altered the course of the entire presidential election. Donald Trump and his allies relentlessly hammered Clinton on the campaign trail. Crowds chanted, "Lock her up!" at rallies, blaming her for endangering national security. Trump insisted she had gotten away with crimes, fuming that Hillary was allowed to delete and acid wash 33,000 emails after they were subpoenaed by Congress, with absolutely nothing done to hold her accountable. Indeed, the FBI ultimately recommended no criminal charges for Clinton, concluding that while she was extremely careless, there was no clear evidence of intent to break the law. I dispute that. Many Republicans were outraged by that outcome, viewing it as a double standard. Anyone else mishandling classified info would have been punished, they claimed. The media endlessly debated Clinton's judgment, but her emails became a lasting meme about misplaced priorities. Even years later, some could not let the email issue die. Fast forward to 2021 to 2023, and now Trump found himself under investigation. This time for hoarding classified materials and allegedly obstructing efforts to retrieve them. The reaction? It depended on who you asked. Democrats and many in the national security community were aghast, arguing that the Mar-a-Lago documents case was far more clear-cut than Clinton's situation. For example, Trump had physical classified files he refused to return, whereas Clinton turned over emails and cooperated with investigators. Debatable. The Justice Department took the unprecedented step of indicting a former president on 37 federal counts, underscoring the seriousness of the breach. Yet Trump's base and friendly media painted him as a victim of a weaponized DOJ, often deflecting by bringing up Clinton's emails again. We saw a parade of whataboutism. What about Hillary's emails? She was in charge, so why is Trump being persecuted on conservative airwaves? Some of the same figures who once excoriated Clinton now downplayed Trump's conduct or spun conspiracies about overzealous FBI agents. On the flip side, many who defended Clinton in 2016 had no patience for Trump's excuses in 2023. A partisan role reversal. The stark contrast was almost comical. Each side selectively cared about classified security lapses only when the other team was at fault. Meanwhile, if you're wondering how I lost my hair, it's because we deal with these double standards in cybersecurity often in politics. Even with Congress, the double standard was evident. Back in 2016, Republicans like Representative Trey Gowdy were aggressive in investigating Clinton's email server and deletions. In 2017, Gowdy, to his credit, also pressed the Trump White House on reports of private messaging apps, warning that Trump officials using Signal or Confide for government business would be the same kind of violation of record-keeping laws. But these inquiries never gained the same traction or outrage. It's a reminder that OpSec failures should be nonpartisan concerns. Classified info doesn't care which political jersey you wear. Yet public outrage often falls along partisan lines. Clinton's email saga became a symbol of untrustworthiness to her opponents, while Trump's document saga was seen by his supporters as an overblown technicality or witch hunt. From a professional cybersecurity standpoint, both incidents were serious mistakes that could have had dire consequences, and both deserved scrutiny. However, the public narrative treated them asymmetrically. One became a defining scandal, the other, at least in some echo chambers, was dismissed or rationalized. The humor or tragedy here is not lost on us. Imagine explaining to a future historian that one leader was nearly jailed in the court of public opinion for oversecuring her communications via a private server and too much deletion, when another is defended for undersecuring top-secret files in a country club bathroom. The only consistent stance a cybersecurity expert can take is that neither of these scenarios is okay. The rules about safeguarding sensitive information exist for a reason, and violating them is a dangerous regardless of who does it. In the end, the Clinton email versus Trump document saga teaches us a few clear lessons. First, OpSec failures at high levels of government can and will happen. With real risks, second, technology evolves, such as private servers versus encrypted messaging apps, but the fundamental problem of skirting official systems remains. And third, public and political reactions may be riddled with double standards. But from a security perspective, we have to call out bad practices consistently, whether it's BleachBitting emails or letting secret files pile up in a bathroom. Both are cautionary tales of what not to do. And perhaps, just perhaps, future officials will learn that if you don't want to be in the next scandal, good cybersecurity hygiene is not optional, and applying it evenly would spare us all a lot of drama. Let's move on to talking about Signal. It's great for privacy, terrible for government ops. I want to emphasize something. Signal itself is not the villain here. Signal is a fantastic application for what it was designed for: private, secure communication for individuals. I use it all the time in my personal life and recommend it to people who want top-notch encryption for texting. It's open source, has been vetted by security researchers, and it keeps your messages out of the hands of hackers, eavesdroppers, and even the service provider itself. If you're an activist, a journalist, or just a person who values privacy, Signal or similar apps like WhatsApp, Wire, etc. is a great choice. Putting aside the metadata issues of Meta's WhatsApp, which is its own privacy nightmare, but that's a rabbit hole for another day. And no, Telegram is a garbage app that is neither private nor secure, and I've discussed this before, which you can watch from the YouTube card here. However, and this is the big however, Signal was never meant for government-level operational security or organizational accountability. It's a consumer app, built for personal use, not for running a digital situation room. Here are a few reasons Signal is not suited to sensitive government comms. No enterprise access control. There's no admin console to manage users. You can't formally add or remove members with oversight. It's all ad hoc. In a government setting, when someone leaves a position or shouldn't see certain info, you need to be able to revoke their access immediately. Signal has no mechanism for that beyond someone manually removing a user from a group, and hoping they still don't have the info. There's no audit trail. Signal keeps no logs of message content. That's by design for privacy. It also doesn't record who was added when, what messages were sent beyond what's on each device, etc. That means if something goes wrong, say a leak or an unauthorized participant, there's no server log to consult. You have zero visibility after the fact. From an accountability standpoint, you are flying blind. Informal identity verification. Signal accounts are tied to phone numbers. In a professional context, that's a nightmare. People change numbers. Someone might use a personal device, and verifying who's who is difficult. In this incident, the group chat thought they all had the right people, but someone added a wrong contact. More on that in a second. The app isn't going to scream, "Hey, that's actually a reporter's number." It just trusts the user's address book. Risk of user error/misconfiguration. The good old PEBCAC, or problem exists between keyboard and chair. The ID10T error, layer 8 networking problems, or many other cute names we give this in IT and cybersecurity. This fiasco proves it. Humans are always the biggest security risk. One slip up, and you can add the wrong person to a highly sensitive conversation. Apparently, an official, reportedly NSC, National Security Council advisor, Mike Waltz, intended to add a colleague, but accidentally added Jeffrey Goldberg instead. Maybe the numbers were similar or saved incorrectly. Whatever the case, one tap invited an unauthorized person into a top secret chat. That is incredibly easy to do on a consumer app with no safety nets. Ephemeral messages and lack of archiving. If they enable disappearing messages, those war plan texts might vanish from devices quickly. That's fine for personal secrecy. But what if you need to refer back to a decision or verify what was said? In a military operation, not having a reliable record can be dangerous. Plus, as mentioned, it blatantly undermines record-keeping laws with no FOIA-able records. In short, using Signal for something like this is using the wrong tool for the job. It's like trying to haul heavy cargo with a sports car. Sure, it's a high-performance machine, but it's not built for that task. And if that's not risky enough, consider this. Signal still depends on your phone number, and that means it relies on the PSTN, or Public Switch Telephone Network. And baked into PSTN is a vulnerable protocol called SS7, short for Signaling System 7. SS7 is what telecoms use behind the scenes to route calls and messages and manage your mobile number. But it was built in the 1970s with zero authentication and full trust between carriers. And guess what? That trust model has been abused for decades. SS7 attacks are a real threat in high-value scenarios. A threat actor who gains access to SS7, usually by compromising a telecom, like the recent Salt Typhoon disaster that compromised many U.S. telecommunication companies, or working within one, can intercept texts and calls, track a device's location, spoof phone numbers, hijack SMS-based two-factor authentication, even take over a Signal account if they intercept the verification code. Now, for everyday users, this is not a big concern. Most people will never be targeted by this kind of sophisticated attack. But for government officials, it's a glaring vulnerability. If you're tying top-secret conversations to a phone number that can be spoofed or intercepted through SS7, you've introduced a major weak point. And Signal can't defend against that. This is exactly why governments and serious institutions use platforms built around identity-based authentication rather than phone numbers. And that's where protocols like Matrix come in. Matrix supports SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language, which allows it to integrate with secure identity providers, IDPs, like Microsoft Entra, Okta, Duo, or other enterprise identity systems. With strong identity and access management, IAM, you can enforce zero trust policies, access limited to managed and compliant devices, full audit logs and message retention, real-time revocation of access, multi-factor authentication, and no access without verified credentials. But let's step out of theory for a second here, because we now know the people using Signal in this case weren't exactly cyber aware. A recent expose from Der Spiegel revealed that several members of this Signal group, including Pete Hegseth, Mike Waltz, and Tulsi Gabbard, had their personal information exposed online, including login credentials and email addresses. And here's the thing. This isn't some isolated incident. I've talked about breaches like this in past videos. NPD, National Public Data, MC2, and many others. In fact, with the power of YouTube's algorithm, there's probably a card up here pointing you to one right now. These breaches happen constantly here in the US because we don't have real enforceable data privacy laws like the EU's GDPR, South Africa's POPIA, Canada's PIPEDA, or even China's PIPL. Yeah, that evil authoritarian regime Republicans love to rant about, they actually have stronger data protections for their citizens than we do. In the US, unless you live in California under CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, your data is pretty much fair game. And that creates the perfect storm for OpSec failures like this one. And this is where I'm going to make my one political stance in this entire video. Not as a partisan, but as a cybersecurity professional. We desperately need federal data protection laws, similar to the EU's GDPR, South Africa's POPIA, Canada's PIPEDA, or even China's PIPL. The only reason we don't have them is because big data companies aggressively lobby against them. Why? Because regulation would cut into their profits. They thrive on the Wild West model of harvesting, selling, and monetizing our personal information without restriction. And it's not just ad tech or shady apps. Some of the most sensitive personal data gets compromised in breaches from companies you've probably never heard of. I've talked before about breaches at companies like NPD and MC2, which compile detailed personal info from things like background checks, the kind of information gathered when you apply for an apartment, a job, or even a loan. And it's not just your browsing habits, it's everything. Your health data and location history, even your genetics. People often assume their health data is fully protected by laws like HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, or HITECH, the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. But here's the catch. Those laws only apply to covered entities like your doctor, your hospital, or your insurance provider. If you're a fitness app, a period tracker, or even a smart thermometer, those companies are not necessarily bound by HIPAA. That means they can collect, analyze, and even sell your health data legally unless a state law says otherwise. That means things like your menstrual cycle data from a period tracking app, your mental health survey submitted to a meditation app, your heart rate and sleep tracking data from a wearable, are often totally unprotected from being sold to third parties or shared with data brokers. And that gets even more disturbing when companies like 23andMe, which literally collect your genetic blueprint, go bankrupt. Because now, all of that DNA is a potential asset for sale. It might be legal under current US law, but in my view, it shouldn't be. So again, I'll say it clearly. We need federal general data protection regulations in the US, not as a political talking point, but as a basic cybersecurity and privacy imperative. If other countries, including the ones US routinely criticizes, can pass laws to protect their citizens' data, why can't we? These companies collect troves of information, names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, criminal records, employment history, and when they get breached, that data floods the dark web with rich, targetable profiles. Now imagine officials who use the same consumer-grade tools as the average person, with their credentials floating around from one of those leaks. That's not just bad luck. That's a breach waiting to happen. So when officials who already lack basic security awareness start using consumer-grade apps like Signal and their credentials are floating around the internet thanks to weak privacy protections, you're just begging for a breach. You're walking around with a target on your back, carrying classified information in a leaky bucket. And one of those addresses, allegedly tied to Pete Hegseth, was registered on a Russian domain. Let that sink in. A senior U.S. official involved in coordinating sensitive military plans using an email system routed through servers in a hostile foreign nation. Now, to be clear, if he had been using a secure and then encrypted provider like ProtonMail, full disclosure, I'm affiliated with them as well as, today's little sponsor, Tuta, based in Germany, a close U.S. ally with strong privacy laws, it would raise some eyebrows, but not national security alarm bells. This isn't just bad OpSec, it's a massive red flag, especially when paired with a messaging platform like Signal that's tied to phone numbers and vulnerable to SS7 attacks. If a threat actor can intercept SMS, spoof numbers, or hijack verification flows, you've now exposed sensitive conversations, and you're doing it with foreign email accounts and unvetted infrastructure. This is how adversaries don't just get lucky. They get handed a gift-wrapped intel leak. This is the consequence of using tools built for privacy, not accountability. This is how you prevent unauthorized access and ensure accountability, not with a group chat where the only requirement is you're in someone's phone contacts. Even the US government has access to enterprise-grade options like Microsoft Teams Government Cloud, which is isolated from commercial instances and subject to federal compliance requirements, or Slack Enterprise Grid, which also offers SSO, retention enforcement, and granular logging. What do all these platforms have in common? They're designed not just to encrypt, but to track, manage, and hold people accountable. The goal isn't just secrecy, it's transparency, compliance, and control. Which brings us to what this whole situation was probably about. Not cybersecurity, but avoiding oversight. According to reports, the Signal group chat was set to auto-delete after 7 days. That's not protecting national secrets from adversaries. That's protecting conversations from the American public and FOIA requests. Let's be blunt. For everyday folks, disappearing messages are totally valid. But for government officials, you work for us. You don't get to erase your tracks just because it's convenient. That's not democracy. That's an oligarchy pretending to use encryption for security while really using it to escape scrutiny. There are already secure communication platforms specifically designed for enterprise and government use, tools that strike a balance between privacy and oversight. For example, Matrix is an open source protocol used by many organizations for secure federated chat. The French government even launched their own Matrix-based app called T-Chap. Chap? Correct me how that's pronounced. Built in-house to ensure end-to-end encryption with centralized administrative control. That means they can manage users, enforce security policies, and maintain auditability, all while keeping data on sovereign infrastructure. Here in the US, classified networks like SIPRNet for secret-level comms and JWICS for top secret exist precisely to provide access-controlled encrypted communication, and they come with logging, credentialing, and monitoring baked in. Even teams in Government Cloud and Slack Enterprise Grid offer secure enterprise-grade options with proper identity enforcement, device trust controls, and retention policies. So the tools are out there. Signal, by contrast, is a free app you can download and start using. No vetting, no policy compliance, and no meaningful accountability. It's great for privacy-minded individuals, but an operational and legal liability for institutions that answer to the public. This was amateur hour on the world stage. When news of this Signal group leak broke, the reaction in Washington was swift and brutal. Lawmakers and security experts didn't mince words. Senator Jack Reed called this carelessness stunning and dangerous. One of the most egregious security failures he'd ever seen. Senator Chris Coons said the folks involved had committed a crime, even if accidentally. And Senator Ruben Gallego, a Marine veteran, summed it up with a scathing phrase that headlines later ran with: amateur hour. When a U.S. senator is literally branding your national security team as amateurish, you know you've messed up big time. Even people outside of government chimed in. Remember Hillary Clinton's email controversy? Well, Hillary herself reacted to this story by posting, "You have got to be kidding me," on social media. Imagine being on the receiving end of that subtweet. After all the hoopla about her private email server, the Trump team goes and does something arguably worse. Like, I don't know, secret group text with war plans? It's a bit of poetic irony, and she wasn't the only one to notice it. The consensus was that this was a major security lapse and displayed a shocking lack of professionalism at high levels. A former Pentagon official quoted in one report basically said, "This is an operational security nightmare," which is about as harsh a rebuke as you couldn't get in the NatSec world. Officials scrambled to contain the fallout. The White House confirmed that the Signal chat was real, calling it an authentic message chain, and claimed they were reviewing how an inadvertent number got added. Inadvertent number. Yeah, that's one way to describe adding a journalist to your secret chat. They also tried to spin the situation with a spokesperson absurdly suggesting that the thread actually demonstrated deep and thoughtful policy coordination between officials. Sure. Deep and thoughtful coordination on an unsecure app with a random editor in the room. Great job, team! Great job! House Speaker Mike Johnson downplayed it too, saying the admin acknowledged the mistake and will make sure it doesn't happen again, and indicating he didn't think anyone should be punished. But others in Congress weren't so sanguine. There were immediate calls for investigations and even hearings to figure out how this happened and how much security was compromised. Throughout all this, it's hard to overstate just how much this situation looked like a clown show to seasoned security professionals. Here were powerful officials using a consumer app in a way your average tech-savvy teenager knows not to. It's a serious matter. Lives were literally on the line, but it's also so avoidable that it's infuriating and darkly comical at the same time. As one observer on Capitol Hill put it, only one word for this: FUBAR. I'll let you Google that acronym if you're not familiar. It sums up things pretty well. The Backfire. When secrecy measures undermine security. The ultimate irony of this whole episode is that by trying to evade oversight, avoiding audits, FOIA, paper trails, etc., the Trump team actually undermined the very security of the operation. They wanted secrecy and deniability. What they got was an uncontrolled leak. By using Signal in this rogue way, they lost all the normal checks and safeguards that official systems provide. When the Yemen war chat was exposed, they had no way to track or contain the info. Think about it. Jeffrey Goldberg had the entire chat history on his phone. He's an ethical journalist, so he reported the story responsibly and presumably didn't release every sensitive data. There are reports he held back some specifics that could harm troops or intel assets. But what if, as a thought experiment, this accident had been discovered not by Goldberg, but by a hostile actor? Say an adversary's agent had somehow been the one accidentally added, or they hacked someone's phone in the group. They would have had U.S. war plans in hand, including precise targets and timing in real time. They could have warned the Houthi targets or otherwise sabotaged the operation. American lives could have been at risk. In fact, even in this actual scenario, Goldberg's presence meant the element of surprise was potentially lost. He knew about the strike 2 hours in advance. He didn't tell anyone who would misuse it, of course, but the point is, the secrecy was blown. And because it was an unofficial channel, there was no way for the government to know what information had been leaked, or to whom, or to put the genie back in the bottle. They had no logs to consult, and they didn't even realize he was in the chat until after the fact. Total chaos. It's worth noting, too, by avoiding official systems, they also avoided the built-in protections of those systems. A classified network or a properly secured government device would at least have encryption plus access control. It's not like Signal's encryption is magically stronger than the government's classified comms. The difference is the government systems are managed. They never have allowed an unknown participant to just slip in. And if something did leak, investigators would have some trail to follow, even if it's just who logged in when. With the Signal free-for-all, it's the Wild West. No accountability, and clearly in this case, no operational security either. As Senator Schumer said on the Senate floor, this is how people get killed. A blunt assessment of the risk they took. And let's not forget the public accountability angle. These officials were likely hoping that by using Signal, none of this would ever see sunlight. Well, now it's not only public, but it's public in the worst way possible, through an embarrassing leak that they can't control. Instead of a FOIA request producing some emails a few years down the line, it exploded in their faces in real time. It's hard to imagine a more self-defeating outcome. The attempt to dodge oversight actually magnified the scandal and the security breach. Talk about backfire. So let's talk about the lessons learned. a.k.a. don't do that again. So what do we learn from this almost cartoonishly bad OpSec failure? A few takeaways for both professionals and the public. 1. Use the right tool for the job. If you're handling sensitive government business, use approved secure communication channels. Period. If none exist for your need, which would be surprising, then at least choose a solution designed for enterprise/government, not a random app. The temptation to grab a convenient app like Signal or WhatsApp can be strong, and hey, they're easy and cost-effective for privacy, but you have to consider the context. Convenience should never trump security and oversight when stakes are this high. 2. Privacy tech does not equal accountability tech. Tools built to maximize privacy, end-to-end encryption, low logs, and anonymity are fantastic for personal use and for protecting civil liberties. but they inherently make terrible tools for public officials who are supposed to be accountable. You can't have untraceable, no record chats and also fulfill your legal duty to preserve records. Those two goals are opposite. As the Associated Press pointed out, the use of encrypted messaging apps by officials often skirt open records laws meant for transparency. If you're a public servant, you have to balance security with transparency, which is a tough tightrope. Simply opting out of transparency by using a privacy app is not a lawful nor ethical solution, and in the end, it may haunt you. 3. Operational security must be holistic. It's not just about encrypting your messages. OpSec means thinking about the whole picture. Who has access? How it's managed? What could go wrong? Well, the administration officials likely thought, hey, Signal's encrypted, so this is secure. They forgot that security is only as strong as the weakest link, which in this case was user error and lack of controls. Good OpSec would have asked, is this chat appropriately restricted? How do we know for sure who's in it? Are we protecting the info from inadvertent exposure? They failed to ask those questions. Encryption became a false sense of security. The lesson? A locked door is useless if you give the key to the wrong person. 4. Don't try to hide if you shouldn't be hiding. I have to say it, if you feel the need to conduct major official business in a way that cannot be audited or recorded, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. At least someone in that group should have thought, why are we hiding this conversation from the record? Is this okay? It's one thing to use secure apps to prevent leaks to adversaries, but using them to prevent oversight from your own institutions is a red flag. In cybersecurity ethics, we talk about the insider threat, and here we kind of see officials making themselves insiders against their own organization's rules. If you operate in good faith, you shouldn't need to erase your tracks. And if you do need to communicate privately, say, to avoid tipping off an enemy, there are legal ways within government frameworks to do that. What happened here was just incredibly poor judgment at best. 5. Test your systems and your people. This one's more for organizations. If you have a process or tool in place, test it for failure modes. Do drills or at least tabletop exercises. What if someone gets unauthorized access into our chat? How would we know? What would we do? Those questions apparently never came up for this team until it was too late. A simple review might have made it obvious that, maybe using a consumer app isn't the smartest way to discuss classified plans. It's a lesson to all enterprise folks. Don't wait for a catastrophic leak to figure out your comms plan was flawed. Now, for us normal folks watching this train wreck, Signal is still great for you. Don't delete it because of these goofs. The takeaway is about context. If anything, this story shows how powerful these privacy tools are. They can even keep secrets from the US government until human error intervenes. For personal privacy, that's encouraging. Just remember that the tools can be double-edged. In the wrong setting, they can cut you. And apparently, Elon Musk is investigating the leak, apparently? Just when you thought the story couldn't get more bizarre, enter Elon Musk. Yes, reportedly, Elon himself is now probing the Signalgate situation. According to public statements, Musk offered to help investigate how the journalist ended up in a group Signal chat with US war planners, which sounds like a plot line from a rejected Silicon Valley episode. But here we are. Here's the thing. Elon Musk is not a cybersecurity expert, and neither is his team over at the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Still can't believe that's what it's really called. The same team whose website was so insecure, people could literally dump fake data into it. They couldn't even handle basic web security, let alone manage a sensitive government breach investigation. And remember when Elon claimed Social Security was paying out to people aged 150? That wasn't a scandal. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of how COBOL systems handle null birth dates. Anyone who's worked even a week in enterprise IT knows that's how mainframes deal with missing data. But Musk took it at face value and tweeted it like he'd uncovered fraud. Let's also not forget, Elon's own ventures haven't exactly been cybersecurity role models. Just look at the chaos that followed his Twitter/X verification policy, where fake accounts caused real-world financial damage in minutes. And Tesla? They had a critical flaw where the entire in-car OS was running as root that meant if an attacker compromised the system, they could take over the car. Steering, acceleration, even braking. Researchers from Keen Security Lab demonstrated this in the wild, showing they could control a moving vehicle remotely. Running as root in production is basically rookie-level bad practice, a textbook example of what not to do if you care about security. And this wasn't just a theoretical exploit. It happened in real-world Teslas. And let's be honest here, Elon Musk is not smart in the way people think he is. He's the poster child for the Dunning-Kruger effect. Someone who knows just enough to be dangerous, but lacks the self-awareness to realize when he's completely out of his depth. His ego gets in the way of sound decision-making, and instead of surrounding himself with qualified experts, he surrounds himself with yes-men who prop up his tech messiah image. Cybersecurity isn't about vibes, not about selling BS dreams or chasing headlines. It's about operational integrity, threat modeling, secure design, identity management, and accountability. And that is exactly what Elon's Doge team has shown time and time again they don't understand. So no, I don't trust Elon Musk or his crew to lead any sort of meaningful investigation into this Signalgate scandal. If anything, they're more likely to leak more data by accident or blame COBOL again. In conclusion, a cautionary tale. This saga will no doubt enter the annals of cybersecurity lore. It's not every day you get to such a clear example of what happens when people prioritize hiding information over handling it securely. We've got a saying in this field: security by obscurity isn't real security. The Trump administration tried to hide their comms on Signal, thinking no one would ever know, and in doing so, they created a security disaster. If they had used proper secure channels, this wouldn't have occurred. If they hadn't tried to bypass accountability, they wouldn't be dealing with an accountability scandal. It's a self-inflicted wound. Or as Senator Mitt Romney reportedly said in a closed-door laugh, paraphrasing an old proverb, the cover-up is worse than the crime, especially when you can't even cover it up right. All right, I made that code up for a bit of humor, but it fits, doesn't it? In the end, the lesson for leaders is clear. Don't confuse a messaging app's encryption with a license to be irresponsible. Cybersecurity isn't just about encryption algorithms and apps. It's about policies, procedures, and plain common sense. And if those at the top ignore, well, we get this. A scenario so absurd and alarming that even seasoned journalists thought it had to be a prank. Unfortunately, it was real. And now it's a case study for the rest of us. If you found this breakdown insightful, ridiculous, or a little bit of both, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on all of my socials. My links are down below. I post regularly on Mastodon for decentralized ad-free updates, Blue Sky for the Fediverse curious, Matrix for encrypted chat and community discussion, TikTok for quick takes, tech humor, and behind the scenes, Twitch, where we hang out, game on Linux, dive into tech, and have deep conversations about cybersecurity and beyond. And yes, join the Discord server if you want to keep the discussion going with other cybersecurity-minded folks. And if you want to go a step further to support what I do, check out my Patreon or grab something from the merch store, both linked in the description. If it helps me keep this content coming, ad-free, honest, and community-backed. Thanks again for Tuta to sponsoring today's video. Secure your communications and don't be like these guys. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, double-check your group chat members, happy hacking, and I'll see you in the next one.